The phone rang at exactly 11:47 p.m., and Victoria knew something was wrong. Not because of the late hour, but because of the silence that followed when she answered. She could hear breathing on the other end, heavy and nervous, like someone trying to gather courage to speak. Her heart started beating faster as she sat up in bed, looking at the empty space beside her where her husband Richard should have been. "Hello," she whispered again, gripping the phone tighter. "Victoria, I'm sorry to call so late." The voice belonged to Sarah, her best friend from college. But Sarah sounded different, sad, almost scared. "I need to tell you something, and I don't know how to say it." Victoria's stomach dropped. She had been married to Richard for 8 years, and lately something felt different. He came home later from work, took more business trips, and seemed distant when they were together. She had pushed these thoughts away, telling herself she was being paranoid. But now, sitting in their big empty house at midnight, she knew her worst fears were about to come true. "What is it, Sarah?" Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw Daniel tonight at the Regency Plaza downtown." Nina paused, and Naomi could hear her taking a deep breath. "He wasn't alone, Naomi. He was with Bianca Laurent." Bianca Laurent. The name hit Naomi like a punch to the stomach. Everyone knew who Bianca Laurent was. The tall blonde supermodel who appeared on magazine covers and walked runways in Barcelona and Florence. She was everything Naomi wasn't. Tall where Naomi was average height. Blonde where Naomi had beautiful dark skin and natural black hair. Famous where Naomi was just a regular person trying to make her small interior design business work. "Are you sure it was him?" Naomi asked, even though she already knew the answer. Nina wouldn't call her at midnight unless she was absolutely certain. "I'm sure, honey." They were holding hands, and Nina's voice broke. They were kissing. "I'm so sorry, Naomi. I didn't want to tell you over the phone, but I couldn't let you find out another way." Naomi set the phone down on the bed and stared at the wall. The beautiful bedroom she had decorated with so much love and care suddenly felt like a prison. The expensive furniture Daniel had bought, the artwork they had chosen together, the photos of their wedding day, everything seemed to mock her now. She picked up the phone again. "How long have you known?" she asked. "This is the first time I've seen them together, I swear," Nina said quickly. "But Naomi, they looked comfortable, like they'd been together for a while." After hanging up, Naomi sat in the darkness for hours. She thought about all the signs she had ignored. The new cologne Daniel had started wearing, the way he guarded his phone, the mysterious credit card bills for expensive restaurants she had never been to, the business trips that seemed to happen more and more often. When Daniel finally came home at 3 a.m., Naomi was still awake, sitting in the living room with all the lights off. She heard his car in the driveway, heard him trying to be quiet as he opened the front door. She listened to his footsteps on the stairs, heading to their bedroom. Part of her wanted to confront him right then, but another part of her, the part that still hoped this was all a terrible mistake, wanted to pretend she was asleep. "Naomi?" Daniel's voice came from the bedroom doorway. "Are you awake?" She didn't answer. She heard him moving around the room getting ready for bed. The man she had loved for 10 years, married for 8, was living a lie. And now she was living it too. The next morning, Naomi woke up on the couch. Her neck hurt and her eyes were swollen from crying. Daniel was already gone. Another early meeting, according to the note he left on the kitchen counter. The same excuse he had been using for months. Naomi made coffee with shaking hands and sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone. She knew what she had to do, but she wasn't ready. How do you ask your husband if he's cheating on you? How do you destroy your marriage with a single question? She spent the day cleaning the house, something she did when she was nervous. She organized closets, scrubbed bathrooms, and vacuumed carpets that were already clean. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. But every time she stopped moving, the images came back. Daniel holding hands with Bianca Laurent. Daniel kissing another woman. Daniel choosing someone else. When Daniel came home that evening, Naomi was waiting for him in the kitchen. She had spent an hour getting ready, putting on makeup to hide the fact that she had been crying, choosing an outfit that made her feel confident. If she was going to have the most important conversation of her marriage, she wanted to look strong. "Hey, beautiful," Daniel said, kissing her cheek like he did every day. Like nothing had changed, like he hadn't been living a double life. "How was your day?" "We need to talk," Naomi said, her voice steadier than she felt. Daniel's smile faded. He set down his briefcase and looked at her carefully. "About what?" "About Bianca Laurent." The change in Daniel's face was immediate. The color drained from his cheeks and his mouth opened slightly, like he was trying to think of what to say. For a moment, Naomi hoped he would deny it, hoped he would look confused and ask her what she was talking about. But instead he closed his eyes and sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. "How did you find out?" he asked quietly. Those 5 words destroyed 8 years of marriage. Naomi had been holding on to a tiny hope that this was all a misunderstanding, that Nina had been wrong, that Daniel would laugh and explain everything. But his question confirmed her worst fears. "So it's true," she said more to herself than to him. Daniel looked up at her, and for the first time in months, he looked like the man she had married. Sad, guilty, and completely lost. "Naomi, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you're having an affair with a supermodel? That you've been lying to me for months? That our marriage means nothing to you?" Naomi's voice was getting louder. All the hurt and anger she had been holding back for the past day finally coming out. "It's not that simple," Daniel said, running his hands through his hair. "I never meant for this to happen. I met Bianca at a charity event 6 months ago, and we started talking. And 6 months." Naomi interrupted. "You've been cheating on me for 6 months." Daniel stood up and tried to reach for her, but Naomi stepped back. She couldn't let him touch her. Not now. Not when she was finally seeing him clearly for the first time in years. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I've been trying to figure out how to handle the situation." "Handle the situation?" Naomi repeated. "Is that what our marriage is to you? A situation?" "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Daniel said, his voice getting defensive. "This is complicated, Naomi. Bianca and we have something special. Something I've never felt before." Each word was like a knife in Naomi's heart. She had loved this man completely, had built her entire life around their relationship, had dreamed of growing old with him, and now he was standing in their kitchen, telling her that he had found something special with someone else. "Get out," she said quietly. "Naomi, please, let's talk about this. We can work through this." "Get out," she screamed, surprising herself with the volume of her voice. "Get out of my house. Get out of my life and go be with your supermodel girlfriend." Daniel stared at her for a long moment, and Naomi could see him making a decision. She could see the exact moment when he chose Bianca Laurent over 8 years of marriage, over the woman who had loved him unconditionally, over the life they had built together. "I'll pack some things and stay at a hotel tonight," he said. "We'll talk when you've had time to calm down." "Don't you dare tell me to calm down," Naomi said, her voice deadly quiet. "And don't bother packing. I'll have your things sent to you. I never want to see you in this house again." After Daniel left, Naomi collapsed on the kitchen floor and cried until she had no tears left. The house felt huge and empty around her. Everything reminded her of him, of them, of the life she thought they had been building together. She had never felt so alone in her entire life. The divorce lawyer's office smelled like leather and disappointment. Naomi sat across from Elaine Porter, one of the best divorce attorneys in the city, trying to explain her situation without breaking down. It had been a week since Daniel moved out, and Naomi hadn't heard from him once. No phone calls, no text messages, no attempts to fix their marriage. It was as if 8 years together meant nothing to him. "Mrs. Carter, I understand this is difficult," Elaine said, her voice gentle but professional. "But I need you to tell me everything about your financial situation. Your husband is a successful businessman, and we need to make sure you get what you're entitled to." Naomi nodded, pulling out the folder of documents she had spent days gathering. Bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds, business records, the paperwork of a life she was now dismantling piece by piece. "Daniel owns Hart Construction," Naomi began. "He started the company 5 years ago, and it's been very successful. We own our house, which is worth about $2 million. We have joint savings accounts, and Daniel has several investment portfolios." Elaine made notes as Naomi spoke, occasionally asking questions about specific assets or accounts. It was surreal reducing 8 years of marriage to a list of possessions to be divided. "What about your own income?" Elaine asked. "I have a small interior design business," Naomi said, feeling embarrassed. "I make maybe $30,000 a year on good years. I've been focusing on supporting Daniel's career, helping him entertain clients, managing our household. That's actually very good for our case." Elaine said, "You sacrificed your own career advancement to support your husband's success. The court will take that into consideration." Naomi's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and felt her stomach turn. It was a link to a gossip website sent by her friend Nina. The headline read, "Construction millionaire Daniel Hart and supermodel Bianca Laurent, Riverton's hottest new couple." The article included photos of Daniel and Bianca at expensive restaurants walking hand in hand down Fifth Avenue getting into Daniel's luxury car. In every photo, they looked happy and carefree. Daniel was smiling in a way Naomi hadn't seen in years. The article talked about their whirlwind romance and speculated about when they might get engaged. "Mrs. Carter, are you all right?" Elaine asked, catching the look on Naomi's face. Naomi handed her the article. Elaine scanned it, and for a moment, her practiced composure slipped, anger tightening her jaw. "This actually helps our case," she said. "It establishes a clear timeline for the affair and underscores your husband's lack of discretion. But I know reading this is excruciating." Excruciating didn't begin to cover it. Naomi felt like she was watching Daniel's life roll on without her, erased from the narrative. The man in those photos wasn't the one who'd vowed forever, or maybe he was, and she'd refused to see it. In the weeks that followed, the truth came in blows. Discovery turned up secret credit cards, lavish gifts he'd bought Bianca, trips taken while Naomi believed he was working. The affair hadn't lasted 6 months, as Daniel claimed, but 8. Worst were the texts Elaine's investigator unearthed thread after thread, revealing how little he valued his marriage, how eager he was to start over. In one he wrote, "I can't wait to be free of all this. Naomi is a good person, but she's so ordinary. You make me feel alive again." Ordinary. The word lodged like a thorn. Naomi stood before the mirror and tried to see herself through Daniel's eyes, the dark skin she'd always celebrated, now somehow dull beside Bianca's glossy perfection. Her natural hair, her average height, her simple clothes. Everything felt insufficient. "You're not ordinary," Nina said when Naomi read her the messages. "You're real. You're kind, brilliant, beautiful. Daniel's a fool who never deserved you." But Naomi couldn't shake it, the creeping thought that maybe Daniel was right. Maybe she was ordinary. And maybe that was why he'd left for someone who seemed extraordinary. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 3 months. Daniel fought her on everything: the house, the savings accounts, even the furniture they had bought together. He claimed that since his business had made most of their money, he deserved the majority of their assets. He accused Naomi of being greedy, of trying to take advantage of him. The irony wasn't lost on Naomi. The man who had cheated on her, who had destroyed their marriage, was now acting like she was the villain in their story. During one particularly difficult mediation session, Daniel and Naomi sat across from each other in a conference room with their lawyers present, trying to divide up the remains of their life together. Daniel looked different, thinner, more expensively dressed, like he was trying to transform himself into someone worthy of a supermodel. "I think I'm being more than fair," Daniel said, sliding a settlement offer across the table. "Naomi gets the house, half the savings, and alimony for 3 years. That's generous considering she didn't contribute much to our financial success." Naomi stared at the papers, feeling humiliated. Even now, even after everything he had done, Daniel was making her feel small and worthless. "Your client destroyed this marriage," Elaine said coldly. "He carried on an affair for 8 months, spent marital assets on his girlfriend, and now he wants to minimize his wife's contributions to their partnership. This offer is insulting." "My client has already moved on," Daniel's lawyer replied. "He's trying to be reasonable so everyone can start fresh." "Moved on?" Naomi looked at Daniel, really looked at him and realized he was already gone, not just physically, but emotionally. He had checked out of their marriage months ago, maybe years ago. She had been trying to save something that was already dead. "Fine," Naomi said quietly. "I'll take the house and half the liquid assets. I don't want alimony. I don't want anything from him that I have to keep asking for." Daniel looked surprised, like he had expected her to fight harder. Maybe he wanted her to fight for him to show him that their marriage was worth saving. But Naomi was tired of fighting for someone who didn't want to be fought for. The divorce was finalized on a cold Tuesday in March. Naomi signed the papers in Elaine's office, officially ending 8 years of marriage with a few signatures. She felt numb, like she was watching someone else's life fall apart. "What will you do now?" Elaine asked as Naomi gathered her things. "I don't know," Naomi said honestly. "Start over, I guess." That evening, Naomi sat in her big empty house, surrounded by boxes of Daniel's belongings that he had never bothered to pick up. The house was officially hers now, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Every room held memories of their life together, and she couldn't escape the feeling that she was living in a museum of her failed marriage. She had given up so much for Daniel, her career dreams, her independence, her sense of self. She had molded herself into the perfect wife, the perfect supporter, the perfect background character in his success story. And in the end, it hadn't been enough. Naomi picked up one of the gossip magazines Nina had been collecting, the ones that featured Daniel and Bianca. The latest issue showed them at a charity gala. Bianca wearing a dress that probably cost more than Naomi made in 6 months. They looked like they belonged together. Both beautiful, both successful, both living the kind of glamorous life that ordinary people like Naomi could only dream about. But as Naomi studied the photos more closely, she noticed something. Daniel's smile looked forced, and his eyes had a tired quality she recognized from the last months of their marriage. Bianca was beautiful, but she was also holding onto Daniel's arm like she was afraid he might disappear. Maybe their perfect relationship wasn't as perfect as it looked. Still, it didn't matter. Daniel had made his choice, and Naomi had to live with the consequences. She was 32 years old, divorced, and completely alone for the first time in over a decade. She had no idea who she was without Daniel, or what she wanted from life now that her entire future had been erased. All she knew was that she couldn't stay in this house, in this city, surrounded by reminders of everything she had lost. She needed to start over somewhere new, somewhere she could figure out who Naomi Carter really was, when she wasn't trying to be the perfect wife to a man who didn't want her. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Naomi was finally starting to feel like herself again. She had sold the big house and moved into a cozy apartment downtown. She was rebuilding her interior design business and had even started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and dinners with nice men who treated her with respect. But on a sunny Thursday morning in June, everything changed again. Naomi woke up feeling sick to her stomach. At first, she thought it was the seafood she had eaten the night before. But when the nausea continued for 3 days straight, she began to suspect something else. She sat on her bathroom floor, staring at the pregnancy test in her hands, watching as 2 pink lines appeared. Pregnant, Naomi's hands shook as she set the test down on the counter. This couldn't be happening. She and Daniel had been trying to have children for years with no success. They had seen fertility specialists try treatments, spent thousands of dollars and countless hours hoping for a baby that never came. It had been one of the biggest strains on their marriage. And now, 3 months after the divorce, just as Naomi had begun piecing her life back, together she was pregnant with Daniel's child. She booked a doctor's appointment for the next day, clinging to the hope the home test was wrong. Dr. Priya confirmed what she already felt. "Congratulations," she said with a gentle smile. "Based on your last period, you're about 8 weeks along." 8 weeks. Naomi did the math. Conception in April, only weeks after the divorce finalized, one of those last attempts to repair what was already broken. "Mrs. Carter, are you all right?" Dr. Priya asked, noting the color drain from her face. "I'm divorced," Naomi said quietly. "My ex-husband doesn't know." Dr. Priya nodded, sympathetic. "That's complicated. Have you thought about telling him?" Naomi hadn't thought beyond the shock. Now sitting there, she pictured calling Daniel. He was busy performing happiness with Bianca magazine spreads, social events, glossy smiles. A baby would rearrange everything. He'd have to be involved. She'd be tied to him for the next 18 years through drop-offs, milestones, perhaps even his wedding to Bianca, their future children, the life he chose over her. She would be bound to the man who broke her. "I need time to think," Naomi told Dr. Priya. "Of course," the doctor said, then glanced back at the chart. "There's something else. I'd like an ultrasound next week. Based on your symptoms and uterine size, you may be carrying multiples." "Multiples," Naomi repeated, hollow. "Twins, possibly triplets," Dr. Priya said. "It's not uncommon, especially at your age if you've had prior fertility treatments." Naomi drove home in a daze. 1 baby felt overwhelming. 2 or 3 felt impossible. Her interior design business was only just recovering, and she was still relearning life alone. She wasn't ready to be a single mother, much less a single mother to multiples. That night, Naomi called Nina. "Are you going to tell Daniel?" Nina asked after Naomi explained the situation. "I don't know," Naomi said. "Part of me thinks he has a right to know, but another part of me thinks he gave up that right when he chose Bianca over our marriage." "What does your heart tell you?" Nina asked. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. "My heart tells me that Daniel hurt me more than I ever thought possible. My heart tells me that he called me ordinary and threw away 8 years of marriage for a woman he barely knew. My heart tells me that he doesn't deserve to be part of this. But what about the baby? Don't they deserve to know their father?" That was the question that kept Naomi awake at night. She thought about her own childhood growing up with both parents who loved her. She thought about the family she had always dreamed of having with Daniel, the children they had tried so hard to conceive, the nursery they had planned but never created. The ultrasound appointment arrived faster than Naomi wanted. She lay on the examination table, nervous about what she might see on the screen. Dr. Priya moved the ultrasound wand over Naomi's belly, studying the monitor intently. "Well, Mrs. Carter," Dr. Priya said with a big smile, "you're having quadruplets. Quadruplets." Naomi stared at the screen trying to make sense of what she was seeing. 4 babies. 4 healthy babies. Dr. Priya confirmed. "This is quite rare, especially conceived naturally. You're very lucky." Lucky, Naomi didn't feel lucky. She felt terrified. 4 babies meant 4 times the responsibility, 4 times the expense, 4 times the sleepless nights. How could she possibly handle 4 children on her own? But as she watched the 4 tiny heartbeats flickering on the monitor, something shifted inside her. These babies were hers. They were the family she had always wanted, even if they were coming in a way she had never expected. They were her chance to start over, to build something beautiful from the wreckage of her marriage. "I'd like to print out some pictures for you," Dr. Priya said. "And we'll need to start planning for a high-risk pregnancy. Quadruplets require special care." Naomi took the ultrasound pictures home and stared at them for hours for babies. 4 little miracles that she and Daniel had created together during their last attempt at reconciliation. These children were the product of love. Even if that love hadn't been enough to save their marriage, she thought about calling Daniel, imagining his reaction to the news. He would be shocked, maybe even pleased. Daniel had always wanted children. But then what would he expect to be involved in their lives? Would he want shared custody? Would he bring Bianca around Naomi's children? The thought of Bianca Laurent holding her babies, of Daniel playing happy family with another woman, and Naomi's children made her feel sick. These babies were hers. She had carried them. She would raise them. She would love them unconditionally. Daniel had made his choice when he chose his new life over their marriage. Naomi made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't tell Daniel about the babies. She would raise them alone, give them all the love and attention they deserved, and protect them from the pain of having a father who might abandon them the way he had abandoned her. It wasn't an easy decision, and Naomi knew it might not be the right one. But it was her decision to make. She was no longer the woman who had shaped her entire life around Daniel's needs and wants. She was going to be a mother, and her children's well-being came first. Naomi quit her interior design business and spent the next few months preparing for her new life. She sold her apartment and moved to a small town, 2 hours away from the city, where nobody knew her story and nobody would ask questions about her baby's father. She found a cute house with a big backyard and started thinking about how to support herself and 4 children. She had always been good at baking. It was a hobby she had enjoyed during her marriage, though Daniel had never paid much attention to her cakes and cookies. But in her new town, Naomi discovered that the local bakery had closed down, leaving the community without a place to buy fresh bread and pastries. Naomi saw an opportunity. She used part of her divorce settlement to open a small bakery, working long hours to get it ready before the babies arrived. She hired a local woman named Mrs. Whitaker to help her. And slowly but surely, Naomi's Fresh Start Bakery became a gathering place for the community. "You make the best chocolate chip cookies I've ever tasted," Mrs. Whitaker said one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen. "And these pregnancy cravings of yours are creating some interesting new recipes." Naomi laughed, rubbing her growing belly. At 6 months pregnant, she was huge. Carrying quadruplets was like carrying a small watermelon, and she was constantly tired and uncomfortable. But she was also happier than she had been in years. "I never thought I'd be a baker," Naomi said. "But I love this. I love creating something that makes people happy." "What about the baby's father?" Mrs. Whitaker asked gently. "Will he be involved?" Naomi had grown close to Mrs. Whitaker over the past few months, but she still hadn't told anyone the complete truth about her situation. "Their father isn't in the picture," she said simply. "It's just going to be me and the babies." Mrs. Whitaker nodded without judgment. "Well, you're not really alone. This whole town is going to help you raise these children. That's what small communities do." Naomi felt tears in her eyes. For the first time since her divorce, she felt like she belonged somewhere. She had built something of her own, something that didn't depend on a man who might leave her. She was creating a life for herself and her children that was based on her own strength and talents. As her due date approached, Naomi sometimes wondered if she had made the right choice about Daniel. But then she'd remember how he discarded their marriage, called her ordinary, chose glitter over love. Her children deserved better than a father who might treat them like inconveniences in his polished new life. Naomi would give her babies everything she had: love, stability, and the certainty that they were wanted and cherished. She might be doing it alone, but she refused to fail them the way Daniel had failed her. Naomi's new life in Millbrook looked nothing like the luxury she'd shared with Daniel, and it was entirely her own. The town of 3,000 felt like another universe from the city she'd left. Neighbors knew each other's names. Kids played safely in the streets, and the biggest thrill was the annual Harvest Festival. Her Fresh Start bakery became a community hub faster than she'd dreamed. Every morning, despite being 7 months pregnant with quadruplets, she unlocked the door at 5 a.m. and fired up the ovens. "Naomi, honey, you need to slow down," Mrs. Whitaker fretted as Naomi eased a tray of fresh bread from the heat. "Those babies will come early. Save your strength." "The bakery needs me," Naomi insisted, breath hitching from the simple lift. "We still have the Johnson wedding cake, and the school ordered 200 cookies for the fundraiser," Mrs. Whitaker tutted, gently taking the tray from her. "The bakery needs you healthy. Sit. I'll handle the heavy work." Hired as an assistant, Mrs. Whitaker had become so much more: a mother figure, a judgment-free friend, the anchor determined to see Naomi through what was coming. "A food magazine called yesterday," Naomi said, settling into the chair behind the counter. "They're doing a piece on small-town bakeries. Someone recommended us." "That's wonderful," Mrs. Whitaker beamed. "This place deserves the spotlight. Your apple cinnamon muffins are unbeatable, and don't even get me started on those lemon bars," Naomi smiled. The success of the bakery still surprised her. She had started it as a way to support herself and her soon-to-arrive children, but it had become something much bigger. People drove from neighboring towns to buy her pastries, and she had already received requests to cater events and ship her baked goods to customers in the city. "I never thought I'd be a businesswoman," Naomi said, watching the steady stream of customers through the window. "When I was married to Daniel, I thought my job was to support his career. I never imagined I could build something like this on my own." "You were always capable of this," Mrs. Whitaker said firmly. "You just needed the chance to discover it yourself." That afternoon, Naomi was decorating the Johnson wedding cake when she felt the first contraction. It was mild, just a tightening in her belly, but it made her pause. At 32 weeks pregnant, it was too early for the babies to be born. "Mrs. Whitaker," Naomi called out, trying to keep her voice calm. "I think I need to go to the hospital." The next few hours were a blur of doctors, nurses, and medical equipment. Naomi was admitted to the hospital and put on bed rest to try to delay the birth of her quadruplets. Dr. May, the specialist who had been managing her high-risk pregnancy, explained the situation. "The babies are healthy, but they're trying to come early," Dr. May said. "We're going to do everything we can to keep them inside for a few more weeks. Every day matters for their development." Naomi lay in the hospital bed, scared and alone. This wasn't how she had imagined her children's birth. She had pictured a calm delivery, maybe with Daniel holding her hand, welcoming their babies into the world together. Instead, she was facing the possibility of premature quadruplets with no partner to support her. Mrs. Whitaker arrived at the hospital with a bag of Victoria's things and a determined expression. "I'm not leaving you to go through this alone," she announced. "My daughter can manage the bakery for a few days." "You don't have to stay," Naomi said, though she was grateful for the company. "Nonsense. You're family now, and family doesn't abandon each other when things get difficult." Over the next week, Naomi managed to delay the birth. The hospital bed rest was boring and uncomfortable, but it gave her time to think about her future. She had made it this far on her own, building a new life and a successful business. Soon, she would be responsible for 4 tiny lives that would depend on her completely. Sometimes late at night, Naomi wondered what Daniel was doing. Was he happy with Bianca? Did he ever think about their marriage, about the life they had planned together? Did he wonder why she had disappeared so completely from his world? She had seen pictures of him in magazines that Mrs. Whitaker sometimes brought to the hospital. Daniel and Bianca at charity events, at business dinners, at exclusive parties. They looked like the perfect couple. Successful, beautiful, and completely absorbed in their glamorous lifestyle. Do you ever regret not telling him? Mrs. Whitaker asked one evening as they watched the sunset through the hospital window. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes she admitted, but then I remember how he looked at me when he chose her. Like I was nothing, like our 8 years together meant nothing. I can't risk my children feeling that same rejection. These babies are going to be so loved, Mrs. Whitaker said. You've already given them more than many children get from 2 parents. 2 weeks later, at 34 weeks pregnant, Naomi could no longer delay the inevitable. Her water broke at 3 a.m., and the medical team sprang into action. The delivery room was crowded with doctors and nurses. Each baby would need their own medical team standing by. Are you ready, Naomi? Dr. May asked as Naomi was wheeled into the operating room. Naomi nodded, though she felt anything but ready. She was about to become the single mother of 4 premature babies. She had no idea how she was going to manage, but she knew she would figure it out. She had to. The key section was surreal. Naomi was awake but numb from the waist down, listening to the medical team work efficiently around her. She heard the first cry, then the second, then the third and fourth. 4 healthy cries from 4 healthy babies. 4 beautiful girls, Dr. May announced. They're small but strong. Naomi heard each baby cry and tears streamed down her face. After years of trying to have children with Daniel, after the heartbreak of infertility treatments and failed attempts, she was finally a mother. Not just to 1 baby, but to 4. The babies were whisked away to the neonatal intensive care unit before Naomi could hold them. At 4 pounds each, they needed special care and monitoring. But Dr. May assured her that they were healthy and strong for babies born at 34 weeks. When can I see them? Naomi asked Grogali as she was wheeled to recovery. In a few hours once you're stable, Dr. May replied. They're doing beautifully. Naomi, you should be very proud. Mrs. Whitaker was waiting in Naomi's recovery room with tears in her eyes and a huge smile. 4 granddaughters, she said, having appointed herself honorary grandmother. I can't wait to meet them. That evening, Naomi was finally able to visit the NICU. Nothing could have prepared her for the sight of her 4 tiny daughters in their incubators, connected to monitors and feeding tubes, but breathing on their own and clearly fighting to grow stronger every day. Have you thought about names? The nurse asked as Naomi stared in wonder at her babies. Naomi had a list of names ready. Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire, she said softly. I want them to have strong, beautiful names. Over the next month, Naomi practically lived in the NICU. She learned to change diapers through incubator portholes, to feed premature babies, and to read the monitors that tracked her daughter's progress. Mrs. Whitaker kept the bakery running, sending daily updates and refusing to let Naomi worry about the business. The whole town is excited about the babies, Mrs. Whitaker reported during one of her hospital visits. People keep asking when they can meet them, and that Food magazine wants to reschedule their interview for after you're back on your feet. Naomi watched her daughters grow stronger every day. Ava was the biggest and most active. Maya was quiet and observant. Ivy had the loudest cry and demanded attention. Claire was the smallest, but also the most determined, always fighting to keep up with her sisters. They're going to be handful, one of the NICU nurses said with a laugh. 4 strong-willed little girls. Naomi couldn't wait. After years of feeling ordinary and forgotten, she was about to become the mother of 4 extraordinary daughters. She was going to give them everything she had, love, security, and the knowledge that they were the most important things in her world. When the babies were finally ready to come home, The entire town of Millbrook seemed to rally around Naomi. People brought meals, baby clothes, and offers to help. Mrs. Whitaker had converted her spare bedroom into a nursery, insisting that Naomi and the baby stay with her until they could manage on their own. "This is what community means," Mrs. Whitaker said as they prepared to leave the hospital. "We take care of each other." Naomi looked at her 4 daughters, each one perfect and beautiful and completely hers. She had lost a husband, but she had gained so much more. She had found her strength, built a successful business, and now she was the mother she had always dreamed of being. Daniel had called her ordinary, but Naomi knew better now. There was nothing ordinary about rebuilding your life from scratch, about starting a business that brought joy to an entire community, or about raising 4 children with love and determination. Naomi Carter was finally exactly who she was meant to be. Coming home from the hospital with quadruplets was like bringing home 4 tiny miracles wrapped in pink blankets. Naomi sat in the back of Mrs. Whitaker's car holding Ava and Maya while Ivy and Claire were secured in their car seats and felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of it all. These 4 little girls were completely dependent on her for everything. ChatGPT said Mrs. Whitaker had turned her cozy home into baby central. The living room held 4 cribs, a changing station, and enough supplies to stock a boutique. The kitchen counters were lined with bottles, formula, and a meticulous feeding chart Naomi had mastered in the NICU. "Don't worry about anything but those babies," Mrs. Whitaker said, easing Naomi in. "I've got the bakery covered, and my daughter Hannah's pitching in. The whole town wants to help." The first weeks were the hardest Naomi had ever known. 4 infants meant feeds every 2 hours. Around the clock someone always needed something. She moved in a haze of exhaustion from bottle to diaper to tears, with no real sleep in between. Yet the joy came in clear, bright flashes. When Ava smiled at 6 weeks, Naomi cried. When Maya wrapped tiny fingers around hers, Naomi's heart flooded. When Ivy and Claire dozed curled together in one crib like they were still sharing space, Naomi knew this was the most important work of her life. "You're a natural," Mrs. Whitaker said one morning, watching Naomi deftly feed 2 babies while rocking the 3rd with her foot. "I've raised 5 kids and never seen anyone manage quadruplets with such grace." Naomi gave a weary laugh. "I don't feel graceful. I feel barely afloat. That's normal. Look at them. They're thriving because of you." It was true. Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire grew stronger by the day. They hit healthy weights, passed each milestone, and began showing who they were. Ava curious about everything. Maya a cuddle seeker. Ivy dramatic and unafraid to broadcast displeasure. Claire the observer, studying her sisters with solemn eyes. By the time they reached 3 months, Naomi finally felt ready to step back into the bakery. Mrs. Whitaker had kept it humming beautifully. But Naomi missed the creative outlet and the sense of accomplishment that came from building something with her own hands. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Mrs. Whitaker asked as Naomi prepared 4 baby carriers for their first trip to the bakery. "I have to be," Naomi said. "The girls and I are a team now. We'll figure it out together." The bakery had never been busier. Word had spread about Naomi's quadruplets, and people came from neighboring towns, not just for the pastries, but to see the famous 4 babies. Naomi set up a play area behind the counter where the girls could nap and play while she worked. "This is better than television," said Mrs. Ramirez, one of Naomi's regular customers. "Watching you manage 4 babies and run a bakery at the same time is like watching a superhero in action." Naomi didn't feel like a superhero, but she was starting to feel proud of what she had accomplished. In less than a year, she had escaped a failed marriage, moved to a new town, built a successful business, and become the mother of 4 healthy children. She had done it all without Daniel, without his money or his connections or his approval. The Food magazine article came out when the babies were 6 months old. The writer had spent a day with Naomi, documenting her routine of morning baking, customer service, and baby care. The article was titled "Rising from the Ashes: How One Woman Built a Bakery Empire While Raising Quadruplets." "Listen to this," Mrs. Whitaker said, reading from the magazine. "Naomi Carter represents the best of American entrepreneurship, taking a personal tragedy and transforming it into triumph. Her bakery serves the best pastries this writer has ever tasted, and her quadruplets are proof that love and determination can overcome any obstacle." Naomi blushed at the praise, but she was also proud. The article brought even more attention to the bakery, with orders pouring in from across the state. People wanted to ship Naomi's cookies and cakes to family members. Restaurants wanted to carry her breads, and other magazines wanted to feature her story. "I think you need to expand," Mrs. Whitaker said as they looked at the growing list of orders. "Maybe hire more help or even open a second location." Naomi considered the ideas. She watched her daughters playing in their carriers. Ava was trying to grab Ivy's toy. Maya was babbling happily to herself, and Claire was studying the ceiling fan with intense concentration. These girls were her priority, but they were also her motivation to succeed. "What if we started shipping nationwide?" Naomi suggested. "We could build a website, hire a few more bakers, and turn this into something really big." Over the next year, Naomi's Fresh Start Bakery grew into Naomi's Fresh Start Company. She hired 3 full-time bakers, set up an online ordering system, and began shipping her signature items across the country. The Quadruplets, now walking and getting into everything, had their own little corner of the expanded bakery where customers loved to visit them. "Mama, work," Claire said one day, her first clear sentence as she watched Naomi decorating a wedding cake. "That's right, baby," Naomi said, picking up her daughter. "Mama works so we can have a good life." Naomi's success was featured in business magazines and local newspapers. She was invited to speak at entrepreneurship conferences and women's business groups. The shy, uncertain woman, who had been called ordinary by her ex-husband, had become a role model for single mothers and small business owners. But the most rewarding moments were still the quiet ones at home. Bath time with 4 giggling toddlers, bedtime stories read to sleepy girls, and morning snuggles before starting another busy day. Naomi had created exactly the life she wanted, one filled with purpose, love, and the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. Sometimes late at night, when the girls were asleep, Naomi wondered what Daniel would think at see her now. The woman he had discarded as ordinary had built something extraordinary. She had created a life that was entirely her own, filled with success and love, and 4 beautiful daughters who thought she was the most important person in the world. Naomi no longer needed Daniel's approval or recognition. She had found something better: self-respect, financial independence, and the deep satisfaction of knowing she could handle anything life threw at her. She was no longer the abandoned wife waiting for someone else to define her worth. She was Naomi Carter, successful businesswoman and devoted mother, and she was proud of who she had become. 5 years had passed since Naomi's divorce, and her life was unrecognizable from the broken woman who had once sat crying on her kitchen floor. Naomi's Fresh Start Company now operated 12 bakeries across 3 states, employed over 60 people, and generated annual revenues of $15 million. Naomi had been featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine and named one of the top 40 under 40 business leaders in the country. But Naomi's greatest pride wasn't her business success. It was watching Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire grow into confident, happy 5-year-olds who filled every day with laughter and adventure. "Mommy, can we help with the new store today?" Ava asked over breakfast, always eager to be involved in Naomi's business activities. "I want to arrange the cookies," Ivy added, bouncing in her chair. "Can I count the money?" Maya asked, having inherited Naomi's head for numbers. Claire, always the quietest of the 4, simply smiled and hugged Naomi's leg. "I just want to be with you, Mommy." Naomi's heart melted. as it did every morning when her daughters reminded her of what really mattered. The bakery empire was impressive, but being their mother was her greatest achievement. Naomi was preparing to open her 13th location, a flagship store in the heart of her old city, the same city where Daniel still lived and worked. It was a bold move, bringing her business back to the place where her marriage had fallen apart. Naomi felt ready to confront her past. Mrs. Whitaker, now Naomi's business partner, and the girls' beloved grandmother figure frowned at the site map. "Are you sure about this location, dear? There are plenty of other cities we could grow into." "I'm sure," Naomi said, skimming the architectural plans for the new store. "I left that city feeling like a failure. I want to go back as a success." She still caught glimpses of Daniel's life through trade magazines and the occasional scroll, though she tried not to. His construction firm was steady but hardly soaring. He and Bianca had gotten engaged 2 years ago, yet the wedding had been postponed twice. Recent photos showed fewer appearances. Daniel wore the same tired look she remembered from the end. Naomi felt no thrill at his apparent struggles. She'd moved past anger and hurt into indifference. Daniel belonged to her history. He had no place in her future or in her daughters. The grand opening of Fresh Start's flagship was set for a September Saturday. Naomi had lined up live music, free samples, and kids' activities. Local outlets were covering it, and she'd invited a slate of business leaders and city officials. She was adjusting a display of signature pastries when Mrs. Whitaker approached, worry clouding her face. "Naomi, you should see this," she said, offering a newspaper. The society page sprawled with a photo of Daniel and Bianca at a charity gala the weekend prior. But the image wasn't flattering. Daniel looked stiff in his tux. Bianca seemed caught mid-argument. The caption read, "Construction mogul Daniel Hart and fiancée Bianca. Lawrence share tense moment at Children's Hospital fundraiser." Naomi studied the photo with cool curiosity. Daniel's expression was the same strained mask she remembered from those last months together. Bianca, still beautiful but somehow sharper looking than in earlier photos, had her finger pointed at Daniel's chest in an accusatory gesture. "Trouble in paradise," Mrs. Whitaker observed. "That's not our concern," Naomi said, folding the newspaper and setting it aside. "We have our own lives to focus on." But Naomi's past was about to collide with her present in a way she never expected. That afternoon, as she was training the new store manager, her assistant approached with a strange expression. "Naomi, there's someone here to see you," she said quietly. "He says he's your ex-husband." Naomi felt her stomach drop. Daniel was here in her store 5 years after their divorce. She hadn't seen him or spoken to him since the day he moved out of their house. "Tell him I'm busy," Naomi said, her voice steadier than she felt. "He's not alone," her assistant continued. "There's a blonde woman with him, and they both look upset about something." Naomi took a deep breath. She had built an empire, raised 4 children, and overcome every challenge life had thrown at her. She could handle seeing Daniel again. Naomi walked to the front of the store and saw them immediately. Daniel looked older with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there during their marriage. Bianca was still stunning, but there was a hardness to her beauty that made her seem less approachable than in her magazine photos. "Hello, Daniel," Naomi said calmly. Daniel stared at her in shock. Naomi knew she looked different, too. More confident, more polished, more successful. She was wearing a tailored business suit and the kind of jewelry that came from earning your own money. Her natural hair was styled in a sophisticated cut, and she carried herself with the assurance of a woman who had built something significant. "Naomi," Daniel said, his voice uncertain. "I had no idea this was your business. I saw the name in the newspaper and thought it might be a coincidence." "No coincidence," Naomi replied. "I started this company after our divorce." Bianca stepped forward, looking Naomi up and down with obvious assessment. "You're Daniel's ex-wife, the interior decorator." I'm a businesswoman, Naomi corrected. I own Naomi's Fresh Start Company. We operate 12 bakeries and employ over 60 people. Naomi saw Daniel's eyes widen as he processed this information. The woman he had called ordinary had built something extraordinary. That's impressive, Daniel said, and Naomi could hear genuine surprise in his voice. I always knew you were talented. Naomi almost laughed at the irony. Daniel had never shown any interest in her talents during their marriage. He had treated her ambitions like hobbies, secondary to his own career goals. What can I do for you? Naomi asked, keeping her tone professional. Daniel and Bianca exchanged a look, and Naomi could see the tension between them. Whatever problems the newspaper had hinted at seemed to be very real. We were hoping to order some items for our wedding, Bianca said, though her voice lacked enthusiasm. Daniel mentioned, you used to bake. Naomi gestured toward the display cases filled with elegant cakes, pastries, and desserts. We do custom orders, but our calendar is booked several months in advance. Money isn't an issue, Bianca said quickly as if that solved everything. It's not about money, Naomi replied. It's about time and commitment to our existing clients. Naomi saw Daniel studying her intently, as if trying to reconcile the confident businesswoman in front of him with the wife he had left behind. She wondered what he was thinking, whether he regretted his choices, whether he ever thought about what their life might have been like if he had valued what they had together. But Naomi realized she didn't really care what Daniel thought anymore. His opinion had once been the most important thing in her world, but now it was irrelevant. She had built a life that didn't require his approval or validation. I'll have my assistant check our availability, Naomi said diplomatically. If we can accommodate your request, someone will contact you. As Daniel and Bianca left the store, Naomi felt a strange sense of closure. Seeing Daniel again had confirmed what she already knew. She had moved on completely. The man who had once been the center of her universe was now just a stranger with whom she had shared a different life. Mrs. Whitaker approached as Naomi watched them walk away. How do you feel? Free, Naomi said without hesitation. Completely free. That evening, as Naomi helped Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire with their homework, she reflected on how much her life had changed. 5 years ago, she had been desperate for Daniel's love and approval. Now she had 4 daughters who thought she was perfect, a business that provided for dozens of families, and the deep satisfaction of knowing she had built something meaningful with her own hands. Naomi had learned the most important lesson of all. She didn't need anyone else to complete her. She was already whole, already enough, already extraordinary in every way that mattered. On a crisp morning in October, Naomi was reviewing quarterly reports when her assistant brought in the day's mail. Among the usual business correspondence and customer letters was an elegant cream-colored envelope addressed in formal calligraphy to Miss Naomi Carter. Naomi recognized the expensive paper immediately, the kind used for high-end wedding invitations. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened the envelope, though she already suspected what she would find inside. Mr. Daniel Hart and Miss Bianca Laurent request the pleasure of your company at their wedding celebration on Saturday, November 5th 10th at the Grand Ballroom of the Aurora Grand Hotel. Naomi stared at the invitation, feeling a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite identify. After 5 years together, Daniel and Bianca were finally getting married. The postponements and delays were over, and they were ready to make their relationship official. Mrs. Whitaker walked into Naomi's office and immediately noticed her expression. What's wrong, dear? Naomi handed her the invitation without saying a word. Mrs. Whitaker read it quickly, then looked at Naomi with concern. Why would they invite you to their wedding? Mrs. Whitaker asked. That seems unnecessarily cruel. I don't think it's meant to be cruel, Naomi said slowly. I think it's Daniel's way of trying to show me that he's moved on, that he's happy with his choice. Naomi studied the invitation more carefully. The wedding was being held at the most expensive hotel in the city, with a guest list that probably included hundreds of business associates and society figures. It was exactly the kind of glamorous event that Daniel had always loved. The kind of celebration that would be featured in magazines and talked about for months. "You're not seriously considering going, are you?" Mrs. Whitaker asked. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. The smart thing would be to throw the invitation away and forget about it. She had built a wonderful life without Daniel, and attending his wedding would serve no purpose except to satisfy curiosity. But another part of Naomi was intrigued by the idea. For 5 years she had been the woman who disappeared after her divorce. The ex-wife who had quietly faded into the background while Daniel moved on with his glamorous new life. Nobody in their old social circle knew what had become of her. "What if I did go?" Naomi said, surprising herself by voicing the thought. "Naomi, that's a terrible idea," Mrs. Whitaker said immediately. "Why would you put yourself through that?" "Because I'm not the same woman who was discarded 5 years ago," Naomi replied, her voice growing stronger. "I've built something amazing. I have 4 beautiful daughters. I'm successful and confident and happy. Maybe it's time people knew that." Naomi thought about Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire, now 5 years old and full of personality and intelligence. Daniel had no idea he had 4 daughters, no idea that his DNA was walking around in 4 little girls who looked exactly like him. The resemblance was undeniable. Daniel's dark hair, the cut of his jaw, that stubborn set to the mouth echoed in each of them. "What's running through your mind?" Mrs. Whitaker asked, catching the look in Naomi's eyes. "I'm thinking Daniel spent 5 years convinced he chose correctly," Naomi said. "Maybe it's time he understood what that choice actually cost." Over the next few days, Naomi couldn't stop staring at the invitation. She looked up the venue, skimmed the guest list via social media, even found their registry museum-priced art, luxury linens, kitchen gadgets that cost more than most people's rent. One evening, she showed the embossed card to her daughters, watching for their reactions. "Who's getting married, Mommy?" Ava asked, tracing the fancy script. "Someone I used to know a long time ago," Naomi said carefully. "Can we go?" Ivy burst in. "I love weddings. Can we wear pretty dresses?" Naomi took in their bright faces, so open, so beautiful, and made a decision that would shift everything. "Actually," she said, "I think we will go." Mrs. Whitaker nearly dropped her coffee when Naomi explained. "You want to take the girls?" "Naomi, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure," Naomi replied. For 5 years, Daniel's lived believing he upgraded. He thinks he picked someone better. He has no idea what he truly gave up. She planned their appearance with the same precision she brought to the bakery, arriving not as a bitter ex, but as a woman who rebuilt something extraordinary from the wreckage. First order of business, what to wear. She took the girls to the city's most exclusive children's boutique and chose matching soft pink dresses, sweet, photogenic, little angels in satin and tulle. For herself, she selected a burgundy gown, elegant without shouting, expensive without flaunting. "Why are we getting such fancy dresses, Mommy?" Maya asked as Naomi arranged for the dresses to be tailored perfectly. "Because sometimes it's important to look our very best," Naomi explained. "We're going to a special event where we want to make a good impression." Naomi also arranged for transportation that would make an impact. Instead of driving her practical SUV, she hired a luxury limousine for the day. She wanted to arrive at Daniel's wedding in style with her 4 daughters, showing everyone exactly what Daniel had unknowingly lost. The more Naomi thought about her plan, the more excited she became. This wasn't about revenge or causing drama. This was about truth. Daniel deserved to know he had 4 children, and her daughters deserved to know they had a father, even if he had forfeited the right to be part of their lives. "I still think this is a mistake," Mrs. Whitaker said as Naomi finalized the arrangements. What if seeing Daniel confuses the girls? What if it opens up questions you're not ready to answer? The girls are old enough to understand basic truths, Naomi replied. And they're smart enough to see that their father chose a different life. But they also deserve to see that their mother is strong and successful, and not ashamed of the choices she made. Naomi spent the week before the wedding preparing herself mentally for the confrontation. She practiced what she would say to Daniel when he saw the girls, how she would explain their presence, how she would handle Bianca's reaction. But most importantly, she prepared herself to walk into that ballroom with her head held high, knowing that she had nothing to apologize for and everything to be proud of. The night before the wedding, Naomi tucked Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire into bed and read them their favorite story. As she looked at their faces so trusting and innocent, she felt a moment of doubt about her plan. "Mommy, are you excited about the wedding tomorrow?" Claire asked sleepily. "Yes, baby," Naomi said, smoothing Claire's hair. "Tomorrow is going to be a very important day for all of us." Naomi knew that attending Daniel's wedding would change everything. Once Daniel saw the girls, there would be no going back to their separate lives. The truth would be out, and Naomi would have to deal with the consequences. But Naomi was no longer the frightened, abandoned wife who had hidden from conflict. She was a successful businesswoman, a devoted mother, and a woman who had learned to stand up for herself and her children. If Daniel wanted to be part of their lives, he would have to prove he deserved that privilege. And if he didn't, well, Naomi and her daughters would continue to thrive without him, just as they had for the past 5 years. Either way, tomorrow would be the day that Daniel Hart learned the true cost of the choice he had made 5 years ago. The morning of Daniel's wedding dawned bright and clear, as if the universe was setting the stage for the most important day of Naomi's post-divorce life. She woke early before Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire, and spent a few minutes in quiet reflection, gathering her courage for what lay ahead. Naomi had barely slept the night before, alternating between confidence in her decision and moments of pure terror about what she was about to do. But as she watched the sun rise through her bedroom window, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was the right thing to do for her and for her daughters. "Good morning, beautiful girls," Naomi said as she woke each of her daughters with gentle kisses. "Today is our special day." The girls were excited about wearing their fancy dresses and riding in a limousine, though they didn't fully understand the significance of where they were going. Naomi had told them they were attending a wedding where they might meet some people from her past, but she hadn't explained that one of those people was their father. Naomi helped each girl with her hair, creating soft curls that framed their faces perfectly. Ava, always the leader, stood still while Naomi worked. Maya asked a dozen questions about the wedding. Ivy danced around the room, unable to contain her excitement. Claire watched everything with her serious, observant eyes. "You all look like princesses," Naomi said as she stepped back to admire her daughters in their matching pink dresses. The most beautiful princesses in the world. Naomi's own preparation took longer than usual. She wanted to look perfect, not to impress Daniel, but to show him exactly what he had lost. She chose jewelry that she had bought for herself with money from her business, styled her hair in an elegant updo that showed off her natural beauty, and applied makeup that enhanced rather than hid her features. When Naomi looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who bore little resemblance to the broken wife Daniel had left behind. This woman was confident, successful, and surrounded by love. This woman had built something extraordinary from nothing. Mrs. Whitaker arrived to help with final preparations and to wish them luck. She was still worried about Naomi's plan, but she could see that Naomi's mind was made up. "You look stunning," Mrs. Whitaker said as Naomi made a final check of her appearance. "Those girls are lucky to have you as their mother, and I'm lucky to have them," Naomi replied, watching Ava help Claire with her shoes. "They've made me stronger than I ever thought I could be." The limousine arrived exactly on time, a sleek black vehicle that looked expensive and important. The girls were thrilled, bouncing on the leather seats and exclaiming over the minibar and television. "This is the fanciest car I've ever been in," Ivy announced, pressing her face to the tinted window. "Wait until you see the hotel," Naomi said, thinking of the Metropolitan's grand ballroom where Daniel and Bianca were about to make their vows. During the drive into the city, Naomi explained a little more about what they might encounter at the wedding. "We're going to see a lot of people I used to know," she told the girls. "Some of them might be surprised to see us, and they might ask questions about who you are." "What should we tell them?" Ava asked, always practical. "Tell them the truth," Naomi said. "Tell them you're my daughters, and that we're here because we were invited." Naomi had spent considerable time deciding when to make their entrance. Too early and they might get lost in the crowd of arriving guests. Too late and they might miss the impact she was hoping to create. She had decided to arrive just as the ceremony was ending, when guests would be moving to the cocktail reception. As the limousine pulled up to the Metropolitan Hotel, Naomi felt her heart begin to race. Through the windows, she could see other wedding guests arriving. Women in expensive dresses and men in tailored suits. Exactly the kind of people who had made up her and Daniel's social circle during their marriage. "Are you ready, girls?" Naomi asked, taking a deep breath. "Ready, Mommy?" they chorused. And Naomi marveled at their innocence and trust. Naomi had timed their arrival perfectly. As they entered the hotel's elegant lobby, she could hear music from the ceremony ending and guests beginning to move toward the cocktail reception. Naomi took each girl's hand, Ava and Mayan on her left, Ivy and Claire on her right, and walked toward the ballroom with her head held high. The scene that greeted them was exactly what Naomi had expected. The Metropolitan's ballroom had been transformed into a wedding wonderland with white flowers, crystal chandeliers, and enough luxury to fill a magazine spread. Guests in expensive attire mingled with champagne glasses, discussing business and social gossip. Naomi immediately spotted several people she recognized from her married life. Former friends who had taken Daniel's side in the divorce. Business associates who had dropped her when she was no longer connected to Daniel's success. Couples who had simply forgotten she existed when she was no longer part of their social circle. The first person to notice Naomi was Julia Bennett, a woman who had been in Naomi's book club during her marriage. Julia's mouth fell open when she saw Naomi looking elegant and confident with 4 beautiful daughters by her side. "Naomi," Julia said, approaching cautiously. "Is that really you?" "Hello, Julia," Naomi said warmly. "It's good to see you." Julia's gaze slid from Naomi to the girls, their shared features, the striking resemblance, the undeniable beauty. "Are these your daughters?" "Yes," Naomi answered with pride. "Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire. Girls, say hello to Mrs. Bennett." They greeted Julia with polite hellos, their sweetness and manners charming everyone within earshot. Naomi noticed conversations stutter and stall as guests clocked the quartet, recognized her, and tried to compute why she was here. "They're beautiful," Julia murmured, still stunned. "How old are they?" 5, Naomi replied, watching realization flare in Julia's eyes. 5 years, the same length of time since Naomi and Daniel's divorce. All around them, the old crowd was doing the math. Curiosity pulled more people in. Naomi greeted each one with easy poise, introducing her girls, answering questions about her life without flinching. "I heard you moved away after the divorce," said Margaret Jo, another former friend. "What are you doing now?" "I own a bakery company," Naomi said simply. 13 locations, 3 states. Surprise and maybe a hint of envy flickered across Margaret's face. They'd expected Naomi to fade quietly while Daniel climbed. They hadn't expected her to return successful, flanked by 4 gorgeous daughters and a confidence built on real accomplishment. As word of Naomi's arrival rippled through the reception, she knew it wouldn't be long before Daniel and Bianca found out. She positioned herself and the girls near the ballroom entrance, impossible to miss. Ava tugged the hem of her dress. "Mommy, everyone is staring at us." "That's okay, sweetheart," Naomi soothed, smoothing Ava's hair. "People stare when they see something beautiful and unexpected." She sensed him before she saw him, a familiar presence moving closer through the crowd. Daniel was walking toward them across the ballroom, his face a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear. Bianca was beside him, looking stunning in her wedding dress, but clearly agitated about something. This was the moment Naomi had been preparing for. 5 years after Daniel had chosen another woman over their marriage, 5 years after he had called her ordinary and walked out of her life, he was about to learn the truth about what his choice had cost him. Naomi stood straighter, held her daughter's hands tighter, and prepared to change everything. Daniel stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Naomi across the ballroom. For a moment, he looked like he might be seeing a ghost. The woman he had divorced 5 years ago, standing in his wedding reception with 4 children, who bore an unmistakable resemblance to his own family features. Bianca, radiant in her designer wedding gown, followed Daniel's gaze and immediately understood that something was very wrong. Her smile faltered as she took in the scene, her new husband staring at his ex-wife, who was surrounded by 4 beautiful little girls in matching pink dresses. "Daniel," Bianca said sharply, grabbing his arm. "Who is that woman, and why is she here?" But Daniel couldn't speak. He was staring at Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire, with a look of dawning recognition that made Naomi's heart pound. The girls had inherited Daniel's dark hair, his strong jawline, and his intelligent eyes. Anyone who knew Daniel well would see the resemblance immediately. Naomi watched as Daniel's face went through a series of emotions: shock, confusion, realization, and finally a kind of desperate hope mixed with terror. She could practically see him doing the math in his head, counting back 5 years to when these children would have been conceived. "Naomi," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper as he approached them. "What are you doing here?" "You invited me," Naomi replied calmly, pulling the wedding invitation from her purse. "I thought it would be rude not to attend." Bianca's eyes narrowed as she looked back and forth between Daniel and Naomi. She was clearly sensing the tension, but didn't yet understand its source. "Daniel, you didn't tell me you invited your ex-wife to our wedding." "I didn't," Daniel said, never taking his eyes off the 4 girls. "The invitation was sent by the wedding planner to everyone on our guest list." "Naomi must have been left on there by mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," Naomi said smoothly. "It was fate." A crowd was beginning to gather around them. Wedding guests who remembered Naomi from her marriage to Daniel were whispering among themselves, clearly fascinated by this unexpected drama. Naomi could hear fragments of their conversations. "Is that really his ex-wife? Those children look just like him. How old do you think they are?" Daniel's best man, Andrew, approached the group with a concerned expression. "Daniel, is everything all right?" Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was still staring at the girls with a mixture of wonder and horror, as if he were seeing his own childhood reflected in their faces. Ava, always the boldest of the 4, stepped forward and looked up at Daniel with curious eyes. "Are you the man who's getting married today?" "Yes," Daniel managed to say. "I am. You look sad for someone who just got married," Maya observed with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. Daniel knelt down to the girl's level, and Naomi's heart clenched as she saw him up close for the first time in 5 years. He looked older, more tired, and there was something hollow in his eyes that hadn't been there during their marriage. "What are your names?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm Ava," Ava said confidently. "This is Maya. That's Ivy and she's Claire. We're quadruplets." "Quadlets?" Daniel repeated, the word hitting him like a physical blow. He looked up at Naomi with an expression she had never seen before. Complete devastation mixed with desperate hope. "Naomi, are they?" "Yes," Naomi said simply. "They're yours." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Bianca gasped and stepped backward, her beautiful wedding dress rustling as she stared at the girls with new understanding. The gathered wedding guests fell silent, absorbing the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. "That's impossible," Bianca said, her voice rising. "Daniel, tell me." "That's impossible." Daniel stood slowly, his legs seeming unsteady beneath him. "When?" he asked. "Naomi, when were they born?" "February 15th, 6 years ago," Naomi replied. "About 8 weeks after our divorce was finalized." Naomi watched as Daniel's face crumpled with the realization of what this meant. These children had been conceived during their last attempt at reconciliation. During the brief period when they had tried to save their marriage before he chose Bianca instead. "You were pregnant," Daniel said, his voice filled with anguish. "You were pregnant when we got divorced, and you didn't tell me." "You made your choice," Naomi said calmly. "You chose Bianca over our marriage, over our family, over everything we had built together. I wasn't going to let you hurt my children the way you hurt me." Bianca's face had gone white beneath her wedding makeup. "Daniel, how could you not know you had children?" "Because I didn't know," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "Naomi, how could you keep this from me?" "These are my daughters." "No," Naomi said firmly. "They're my daughters." "You gave up any claim to them when you walked out of our marriage for another woman." Ivy, who had been watching the adults with growing concern, tugged on Naomi's dress. "Mommy, why is everyone upset? Did we do something wrong?" Naomi immediately knelt down and gathered all 4 girls close to her. "No, babies, you didn't do anything wrong. You're perfect, and I love you more than anything in the world." The tenderness in Naomi's voice and the obvious love between her and her daughters seemed to break Daniel completely. Tears began streaming down his face as he watched his ex-wife comfort the children he had never known existed. "Naomi, please," Daniel said, reaching toward the girls. "Let me talk to them. Let me explain." "Explain what?" Naomi asked, standing and putting herself between Daniel and her daughters. "That you chose a glamorous lifestyle over the family you already had. That you called their mother ordinary and threw away 8 years of marriage for someone you barely knew." The wedding guests were now openly staring, some of them recording the confrontation on their phones. This was the kind of drama that would be talked about for years. The society wedding that became a public revelation of family secrets. Bianca, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly found her voice. "I can't do this," she said, her voice high and strained. "Daniel, I married you thinking you were free, thinking your past was behind you. I didn't sign up to be a stepmother to 4 children. Bianca, please," Daniel said, turning to his new wife with desperation. "We can work this out." "Work this out?" Bianca laughed bitterly. "Your ex-wife just showed up at our wedding with your quadruplets. How exactly do we work that out?" Naomi watched this exchange with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had wanted Daniel to see what he had lost, but seeing him fall apart in front of everyone was harder than she had expected. "We should go," Naomi said to her daughters. "This isn't our celebration." "Wait," Daniel said, grabbing Naomi's arm. "Please don't take them away again. I just found out I have children. I have rights." Naomi looked down at Daniel's hand on her arm, then back up at his face. "You have no rights," she said quietly. "You gave up your rights when you chose someone else over your family. You've missed 5 years of their lives, Daniel. 5 years of first words and first steps and bedtime stories and birthday parties. You don't get to walk back into their lives just because it's convenient for you now." "I didn't know," Daniel said desperately. "If I had known you were pregnant, I never would have left." "But you did leave," Naomi replied. "You left me for her, and you would have left your children too, if it meant keeping your new lifestyle. I shielded them from that kind of rejection." Claire, quiet, watchful, stepped forward and peered up at Daniel with solemn eyes. "Are you our daddy?" The question hung there, sharp as a blade. Daniel stared down at his youngest and saw his own gaze mirrored back at him, and he broke. "Yes," he whispered. "I'm your daddy, and I'm so sorry I haven't been there." Claire weighed this, then shook her head. "No, you're not our daddy. Our daddy is in heaven, and he watches us. You're just a man who made mommy sad." The clean, simple truth of it hit the room like a shockwave. Daniel folded into a nearby chair, crushed by all he'd missed in the child who had just refused him. Naomi gathered her girls and headed for the doors. She'd done what she came to do. Daniel now understood the price of his choices. But her daughters came first, and this spectacle had already gone too far. "Naomi," Daniel called after them. "This isn't over. I want to be in their lives." She paused, looked back once. "Then prove you deserve that privilege," she said evenly. "Right now you have a wife to attend to." As they left the ballroom, Bianca's voice rose behind them. "I want an annulment, Daniel. I didn't marry into this." Naomi didn't turn around. She'd spent 5 years building a life without him and wouldn't let his sudden return shatter the stability she'd forged for her girls. Still, as the limousine carried them home, she knew the ground had shifted. Daniel knew about Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire now. He would try to claim a place. "Mommy," Ava asked softly, watching the city slide by, "why was that man so sad?" Naomi looked at her 4 trusting faces and made herself a promise. Whatever came next, any involvement Daniel had would be on her terms, only in ways that protected and served the children who were her entire world. 2 weeks after the wedding showdown, Naomi sat in her office going over expansion plans when her assistant tapped on the door. "There's a man here to see you. He says his name is Daniel Hart." Naomi's stomach tightened. She had been expecting this visit ever since the wedding, but she still wasn't sure she was ready for it. "Send him in." Daniel looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes had the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept in days. He stood in the doorway of Naomi's successful business, taking in the professional space she had created, the awards on her walls, the evidence of everything she had built without him. "Hello, Naomi," he said quietly. "Daniel," Naomi gestured to the chair across from her desk. "I assume you're here to discuss the girls." Daniel sat down heavily and ran his hands through his hair. "Bianca asked for an annulment. She said she couldn't handle being married to someone with so much baggage from his past." Naomi felt a brief moment of satisfaction followed immediately by concern. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not," Daniel said with a bitter laugh. "And I don't blame you. I destroyed my marriage to you, and now I've destroyed my marriage to her. I seem to be very good at ruining relationships." Naomi studied Daniel's face, seeing genuine pain and regret there. This wasn't the confident, arrogant man who had left her for a supermodel. This was someone who had finally realized the true cost of his choices. "Why are you here, Daniel?" Naomi asked. "I want to meet my daughters properly," Daniel said. "I want to be part of their lives if you'll let me." Naomi leaned back in her chair. "Why should I let you? You've missed 5 years of their lives. You've never changed a diaper. Never read them a bedtime story. Never comforted them when they were sick. What makes you think you deserve to be their father now?" "Because they're my children too," Daniel said, his voice rising slightly. "Because I have rights." "No," Naomi said firmly. "You have no rights. Your name isn't on their birth certificates. You've never paid child support. You've never even acknowledged their existence until 2 weeks ago. Legally and morally, you're just a stranger to them." Daniel's face crumpled. "Naomi, please. I know I made terrible mistakes. I know I hurt you in ways I can never take back, but these children are innocent. They shouldn't have to pay for my failures." Naomi was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire. They were happy, well-adjusted children who had never felt the absence of a father because, Naomi had worked so hard to give them everything they needed. But she also knew that someday they would have questions about their biological father, and she wanted to be able to give them honest answers. "If I were to consider letting you meet them properly," Naomi said slowly, "it would be on my terms at my pace, and only if I believe it's in their best interest." Daniel nodded eagerly. "Whatever you think is best. I just want a chance to know them. First, you need to understand something," Naomi continued. "These girls have a father figure in their lives. His name is Ethan Morgan, and he's been dating me for the past year. He loves them, and they love him. You would not be replacing him." Daniel's face darkened with jealousy. "Who is he?" "He's a pediatrician," Naomi said. "He's kind, patient, and wonderful with children. He treats Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire like they're his own daughters. And he's never once tried to replace you because to him, you were never really there to begin with." The mention of another man in Naomi's life clearly stung Daniel. But Naomi didn't care. She had moved on, found love again, and built a family that included people who actually showed up for her and her children. "Second," Naomi continued, "if you want to be part of their lives, you need to prove that you're committed for the long term. Not just when it's convenient, not just when you're feeling guilty, but through homework help and soccer games and teenage drama and everything else that comes with being a parent." "I want that," Daniel said. "I want all of it." "Third, you need to go to therapy. You need to figure out why you make such destructive choices in your relationships. And you need to become the kind of person who can be trusted with children's hearts." Daniel nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." Naomi looked at this broken man who had once been her husband, who was the biological father of her children, and felt something she hadn't expected: pity. Daniel had chosen glamour over love, excitement over stability, and now he was alone with nothing but regrets. "I'll think about it," Naomi said finally. "But Daniel, if I do decide to let you into their lives and you hurt them or disappoint them or treat them like they're less important than your career or your social life, I will make sure you never see them again. Do you understand?" "I understand," Daniel said quietly. After Daniel left, Naomi sat in her office thinking about the conversation. Part of her wanted to protect her daughters from any possibility of disappointment, but another part of her knew that they deserved the chance to know their biological father, even if that relationship would be complicated. That evening, Naomi talked to Ethan about Daniel's visit. Ethan Morgan was everything Daniel wasn't: steady, reliable, and completely devoted to Naomi and her daughters. He had proposed to Naomi 3 months ago, and they were planning a quiet wedding in the spring. "What do you think I should do?" Naomi asked as they watched Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire chase each other across the backyard. "Trust your instincts," Ethan said, sliding an arm around her. "You've protected and raised those girls beautifully for 5 years. You'll make the right call for them now. Are you worried about another man being in their lives?" Naomi asked. Ethan smiled. "Naomi, I fell in love with you knowing you had 4 children from a previous relationship. I chose to love them as my own. If their biological father wants a place, and if that's what's best for them, I'm all for it. This is steadiness. The way he put the girls first was why she loved him." Over the next weeks, Naomi watched Daniel closely. She saw him start therapy, turn down social invitations to focus on himself, ask real questions about child development and parenting. Slowly, cautiously, she began to believe his desire to know his daughters might be sincere. 6 months later, Naomi set up the first supervised visit. A neutral spot, a family restaurant, somewhere the girls would be at ease, and she could see how Daniel handled it. "Girls," Naomi said once they were seated, "I want you to meet someone. This is Daniel. He's your biological father." Ava, 6 now and more self-assured than ever, studied him. "Are you the man who made Mommy sad?" "Yes," Daniel said, plainly. "I made very bad choices, and I hurt your mother. I'm sorry for that. Maya tipped her head. Why did you hurt Mommy? Daniel glanced at Naomi. She gave a small nod. Because I thought I wanted different things, he said carefully. But I was wrong about what mattered. Ivy ever dramatic folded her arms. Mommy says you left us before we were born. I didn't know you existed, Daniel replied. If I had known, I would have made different choices. Claire, the quietest, finally spoke. We already have a daddy. His name is Ethan, and he's going to marry Mommy. Pain flickered across Daniel's face, but he nodded. I know about Ethan. I'm glad you have someone who loves you. I'm not here to replace him. I just want to be another person who cares about you if you'll let me. The visit lasted 2 hours, and Naomi was surprised by how well it went. Daniel was patient with the girls' questions, honest about his mistakes, and genuinely interested in learning about their personalities and interests. When it was time to leave, Ava surprised everyone by hugging Daniel. Goodbye. Can we see you again? She asked. Daniel looked at Naomi, hope written all over his face. Naomi nodded slowly. Over the following months, Daniel became a regular but carefully managed part of the girls' lives. He attended their school plays, helped with homework, and slowly began to build relationships with each of his daughters. It wasn't easy. There were tears, difficult questions, and moments when Naomi questioned her decision. But gradually, the girls began to accept Daniel as another adult who cared about them. They called him Daniel rather than Dad. That title belonged to Ethan, but they seemed to understand that he was special in his own way. A year after their first meeting, Naomi married Ethan in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire served as flower girls, and Daniel attended as a guest, watching the woman he had lost marry a man who truly deserved her. After the ceremony, Daniel approached Naomi and Ethan. Thank you, he said simply, for letting me be part of their lives and for showing me what real love looks like. Naomi looked at Daniel, seeing a man who had finally learned the difference between what glittered and what was truly valuable. He would never be the father Ethan was to her daughters, but he was trying to be the best version of himself he could be. They're lucky to have people who love them, Naomi said. All of us. As Naomi danced with Ethan at her wedding reception, surrounded by her 4 beautiful daughters and the community that had supported her through everything, she felt completely at peace. She had learned that real love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect appearances. It was about showing up day after day, choosing the people you love over everything else. Daniel had taught her what she didn't want in a partner. Ethan had shown her what true love actually looked like. And Ava, Maya, Ivy, and Claire had taught her that she was stronger and more capable than she had ever imagined. Naomi Carter had started as an ordinary woman who thought her worth came from being the perfect wife. She had become an extraordinary woman who knew her value came from within. A successful businesswoman, a devoted mother, and a person who had turned her greatest heartbreak into her greatest triumph. The girl who had once been called ordinary had created a life that was anything but. And she had done it all by learning the most important lesson of all, that she was already enough exactly as she was.